Let us pray. Almighty God, giver of all victories, we thank thee for the opportunities which abide in our land. For they the guidance in the hour of peril, and they the tender love in times of need. Help us to remember the reverence, the value, and devotion of our departed comrades. Not only those whose body consecrate our country's soil, but also those who sleep beyond the seas, and those others whose resting place will not be known until the last day, when the deep will have given it up dead. Keep us forever firm in righteousness. Amen.
Hello, my name is Ryan Cobley, and I'm the Veteran Service Officer for the Town of Westford. Thank you for joining us during this Memorial Day ceremony. Although we would like to be together on this Memorial Day, the change from in-person to video was necessary to keep those around us safe and healthy. Every year, we pay our respects to the military men and women who have given their lives in the pursuit of freedom, and this year will be no different. Thank you for the understanding. It is our hope that next year we can go back to remembering together in the town common under the flag. National Military Appreciation Month is celebrated every May and is a declaration that encourages every citizen to observe the month as a symbol of unity. Honoring those who bravely risk their lives is something that many Americans do daily. In more recent times, you could thank a veteran you came across in a public place, but it was the fallen that you could not thank. I urge you in this very difficult time to do something you may not normally have done. Take a moment to think about the sacrifices others have made in the name of freedom. Visit the grave of a fallen veteran and spend a moment in silence. Take a walk outside, visit a memorial monument, and reflect on what has passed and where we are now. As you venture out on a walk or a drive, notice that the flags were placed at the gravestones over the past few weeks. Please remember that not all of our heroes are home and laid to rest in a final resting place. Our nation continues to try to bring home each and every one of our missing service members. One day we may be able to say that they are all home, but until then we must remember them too. Keep their actions alive in our memories and in our hearts. I came across a quote that I felt was very relatable given the current situation. Jennifer Gronholm said, "Ceremonies are important, but our gratitude has to be more than just visits to the troops and once a year Memorial Day ceremonies. We honor the dead best by treating the living well. Because the ceremony this year was canceled, we need to make sure that we honor the dead in every way we can. Be kind to one another, offer simple gestures, call someone who might need a friend. It is what our heroes would have done. Remember those who have died every day, not just on Memorial Day. Remember them as you notice the flag in the town common or the large one down at Cornerstone. As long as we continue to remember those heroes and try to live in a way that honors them, we can be sure that they did not die in vain. Thank you for joining us during this very different Memorial Day. Be kind and stay safe."
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Lori Trahan, and I'm honored to be joining you during this special Memorial Day commemoration. On Memorial Days past, we solemnly honored heroes fighting on the front lines who gave their all to defend our country. This year, as we take time to remember their sacrifices, we think about the spirit in which our veterans acted as they defended our country. And we keep in mind the brave men and women who are still fighting to keep us safe even as this pandemic rages across the globe. The individuals we memorialize today embody selflessness, resilience, and patriotism. They put love of country above everything else and knew that we as Americans are at our best when we are unified. This year, as we face new challenges, which can feel insurmountable at times, I'm reminded of the courage and bravery veterans have displayed during moments of despair throughout our history. It's in their memory that we come together as one country, doing all that we can to emerge from this crisis stronger. What is needed in our country right now is a renewed sense of shared values. As our national motto reminds us, though we are many peoples from many different backgrounds and experiences, we are all one big American family. We must remember this as we honor the sacrifice of our heroes and band together to beat this virus. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, time spent with veterans, service members, and their families gives me unique perspective and underscores the importance of keeping those who have put their lives on the line at the forefront of all our policy decisions. What we do today and into the future must reflect the difficult sacrifices made by our service members. In that spirit, I encourage you to do something to build community this Memorial Day weekend, to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice by honoring their memory and taking action to reach out to someone who might be struggling. While we cannot be together as we have in years past, we shouldn't let that stop us from paying our respects and doing our part to make the world a better place, just as the folks we memorialize today would have wanted. Thank you again for including me in this special virtual occasion. I wish all of you a safe and healthy Memorial Day.
Today, our nation, our Commonwealth, and our town of Westford face the unprecedented and unique challenges of dealing with the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. A year ago, when we gathered on Westford Common to commemorate one of our most solemn and important holidays, we could not have imagined that 1 year later, life as we knew it would be so radically changed. But this challenge, like so many others that our country has faced over the last 2 centuries, will be fought head on. And like the countless sacrifices of those who have worn the uniform of the United States, will be successful in defeating the virus. And it will take all of us to do it. As it has in the past, the shared sacrifices of those we honor today should guide and inspire us as we face these serious challenges. Today I speak to you electronically for the first time as we gather not on the town common of Westford as we had for so many years, but from Pine Grove Cemetery and in each and every home in Westford to honor and to salute those brave veterans who have left us. Memorial Day is one of our nation's most solemn and revered holidays. We recall the glory and sacrifice of those who set their personal aspirations aside for the preservation of our nation in times of war. We pause to remember the true cost of freedom and to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice to preserve and to protect it. The many fathers, brothers, and sons, the many mothers, sisters, and daughters who have made the ultimate sacrifice so we could continue to live free in our great nation. We come together to remember those special American heroes who have served our nation over the years, and we honor their sacrifice on this sacred day. It's a special day to remember the brave men and women who have gave of themselves to ensure that we could live the life in the American way. Today is one of those moments when we pay tribute to all those who have forged our history with their sacrifice, their service, and hold close the memory of those lost long ago. As we come together to honor our heroes in Westford, all across Massachusetts and all across America, citizens are pausing to remember, to pay private and silent tribute to those who have sacrificed everything to preserve our freedom. While they may not be doing so publicly in town halls and in town commons around our nation, they are nevertheless remembering our heroes on Memorial Day. For regardless of how we do it, we must always remember and honor their memory. We owe it to the heroes that died and the loved ones that have left behind to make sure that their sacrifices were not made in vain and that their service to this great nation will always be honored. Our debt to them can never fully be repaid, but it is our obligation to never stop trying to do so by remaining a nation and a people worthy of their sacrifice. By living our own lives the way the fallen lived theirs. By striving to match their sacrifices that they made. By emulating what our patriots stood for. And by honoring and supporting the families that they left behind. So as we collectively come together to honor and celebrate the brave men and women who have worn the uniform of the United States of America, we do so as individuals and families across our nation. And while we may not be physically gathered in one place, our hearts and our minds are united in honoring our American heroes who have left us. May God bless them all, always. Grant them peace in their internal resting places. And may God bless all of us in this unique time. Thank you.
Hello, Westford. Thank you for joining us for our virtual Memorial Day gathering. Thank you to Ryan Cobley, our Veterans Services Officer, and WestfordCAT for putting together this program. Westford began gathering for Memorial Day after the Civil War as a way to honor those who have served our country and to remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. As we face loss and uncertainty, there is comfort in the familiar. Reading the newspaper accounts of Memorial Day ceremonies from 100 years ago, we recognize that our Memorial Day ceremony is comforting because it is familiar. Before I begin, it should be noted that 100 years ago, the Westford wardsman reported that the speaker at the Memorial Day ceremony, Royal Hayes from Draycott, spoke for well over an hour, recounting the history of the United States from the time of the Pilgrims through Royal Hayes's 18 months of service during World War I. I promise I will be brief today. In 2020, we find ourselves in difficult times as our nation and the world struggles to address the pandemic. During difficult times like these, we look to our veterans for inspiration because they know, better than any of us, the value of shared sacrifice. Connecting across time to those who have gone before us, whether by decades or centuries, helps us focus on enduring today's struggles with the promise of freedom and prosperity in the future. Westford residents have always been willing and ready to serve in our country's time of need. This spring brought us the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II and the 45th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. But today, I'd like to go back even farther to the events of 100 years ago. Westford was not immune from the flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919. Dozens of healthy adults passed away, including Dr. Orion Wells, who was only 38 years old. At the same time, 5% of our town's population was serving in World War I. That would be the equivalent of 3 classes from WA entering the service. I would like to share with you excerpts of accounts of past Memorial Day celebrations, as reported in the Westford Wardsman, not because the celebrations were remarkable, but because the accounts are familiar in a comforting way. The account of the 1908 Memorial Day includes the following. It is the day on which the memory of the dead is honored by the living, with flowers and tender thoughts, and the soldier dead are honored with special and impressive services by their comrades. The public buildings and many private residences were decorated with flags. At 9:30, the Veterans Association formed at the town hall and proceeded to Fairview. Captain S.H. Fletcher was Chief Marshal of the day, and the veterans were escorted by the Sons of Veterans and the Nashua Military Band. Conveyance was provided for the veterans by G.E. Gould's 4-horse barge, trimmed with flags and bunting. In the afternoon, owing to the rain, it was necessary to give the band concert in the hall. This arrangement was not so pleasant as it would have been on the common in the open air, but they gave a fine concert to an appreciative audience. Memorial Day in 1909. The beautiful weather and the successful carrying out of the day's plans made the Day of Memories successful and enjoyable, notwithstanding the undercurrent of sadness this day brings to many hearts. To the GAR men and to many others, particularly to those who decorated mounds made in God's acres since last Memorial Day. The veterans decorated every soldier's grave in the 4 cemeteries, either Sunday or Monday, with flowers and a flag, which signifies so much to the soldier heart. 1918 Memorial Day. Memorial Day, with its fuller significance, was fittingly observed last week, Thursday. Honor being given to the patriotic dead and to the band of surviving veterans, of which there were 8 present to take part in the march and exercises at the town hall, and were as follows: Commander Wesley O. Hawks, J. Everett Woods, Wayland F. Balch, John Wilson, Joseph E. Knight, Fred A. Hildreth, George W. Nesmith, and Thomas Sullivan. 1920 Memorial Day came into its own this year in charge of the Legion men who worked with the Civil War veterans. Ideal weather conditions helped to make all arrangements more successful, and the newer significance of the nation's Memory Day was beautifully emphasized. Union services were held at the Unitarian Church Sunday morning. The church was filled with people. The decorations were effective, consisting of flags and a profusion of white and purple lilacs, which were at their best at Decoration Day this year. At 1 o'clock, the rounds to the cemeteries were made and the graves of all the soldier dead were decorated. The singing was in charge of Robert McCarty, and the GAR and American Legion services were carried out. Monday, several hundred people enjoyed the services at the hall and the concert at the Common in the afternoon. The Civil War veterans, the American Legion, the sons and daughters of veterans, formed in line at the town hall and marched to the Calvary Building in Boston Road, led by the Abbott Worsted Company Band of Graniteville and Forge Village. The line was then formed and proceeded to the Soldiers' Monument, where the impressive GAR and American Legion services were held, including the roll call, salute, and taps for the dead. Today, I invite you to connect to our past and to take time to participate in our long tradition of honoring our veterans. Take a walk in our cemeteries. Visit the town common to view the memorials to those who have served. Call a veteran and thank him or her for their service. Find strength in our shared past to carry us through these difficult days. Westford has a long tradition of strength, generosity, and resilience. God bless each of you and all our veterans.
Revolutionary War, Oliver Barrett, Caesar Basin, Oliver Bates, Josiah Brooks, Ephraim Cummings, Daniel Dudley, Jesse Dudley, Paul Fletcher, Raymond Fletcher, Ebenezer Foster, Jonathan Hadley, killed in action, Samuel Keyes, Joseph Kidder, Abijah Mason, Joseph Minot, John Nutting Jr., Thomas Nutting, John Parker, Jethro Prince, John Robinson, Thomas Rogers, Robert Skinner, Joseph Wright Jr., Stephen Wright. War of 1812. Joel Abbott, Walter Abbott, Oliver Fletcher, James Kemp. Civil War. Harvey N. Bailey, Wayland F. Balch, A. I. Bicknell, James Bicknell, Nathan D. Bicknell, killed in action. George Warren Blodgett, killed in action. Salian B. Coburn, John Wesley Craig, Reuben Wright Cummings, William Dane, killed in action. Ansel Davis, William Dinsmore, Albert W. Fletcher, killed in action. Joel Albro Fletcher, James Tilly Flint, Henry A. Fryer, John Harris, Francis Perkins Howard, Everett Edward Hutchins, killed in action. Thomas J. Hutchins, Warren Eldridge Hutchins, Alfred Jackson, Franklin M. Jewett, John Jubb, Edward Keyes, George M. Lawrence, Joel F. Lawrence, killed in action. William Metcalf, Charles Minor, Hiram Peabody, Augustus Reed, Charles B. Reed, Luther F. Reed, John F. Richards, died as a POW. Alfred Austin Richardson, Gardner Hamlin Richardson, Patrick Sheehan, William H. Shedd, John Z. Taylor, Dexter W. Waterman. Spanish-American War. Alonzo A. Adams, Fred Paul Collins, Walter L. Cutler, Robert Choate Dexter, Madison Albro Foster, Burton D. Griffith, Frank D. O'Brien, William D. Pitkin, Philip Reginald Prescott, George H. Whitney. World War I. Harry J. Aaron Sr., Edward Mosley Abbott, Howard J. Ackerley, William G. Atherton, George L. Barry, Edward J. Bichard, killed in action. Walter Orrin Beebe, Henry A. Bayer, Edgar C. Bebeau, Chester E. Blaisdell, Walter Lowell Blanchard, Ernest Wilfred Bridgeford, Joseph Norbert Boulay, killed in action. William Fullen Buckingham, John J. Burns, Daniel C. Callis, Wilfred J. Carpentier, Homer Oscar Chandonnet, Frank Charlton, Raymond Vincent Charlton, Filippo Colasanti, John Lawrence Cannell Sr., Leo James Cannell, Harold Frederick Cannell, Wiley Cooper, Joseph Francis Costello, Thomas J. Costello, killed in action. D. Cody, D. Krichaney, Joseph Raymond Krichaney, Henry G. E. Kuchar, Dwight William Cowles, James Hunter Crocker, P. Crocker, Aura Drew Darling, Francis Da Silva, Robert Choate Dexter, Ralph A. Dodge.
World War I continued. William J. Duke, Charles Franklin Dupuy, Donat Donald Dupree, Gustav Eliasson, James Eliot, Matthew Eliot, Frederick J. Fitzpatrick Sr., Ralph Andrew Fletcher, William Carroll Furbush, Ronald Archibald Grant, John Gray, Arthur Theodore Greenslade Sr., my gramp, Albrecht Grenier, Eddie B. Hallberg, Edward T. Hanley, Herbert Hanley, Axel Friedhoff Hansen, William Harrington, William T. Hart, J. C. Heald, E. Healy, F. C. Healy, Arthur Griffin Hildreth, Clarence Edward Hildreth, Thomas Alfred Hughes Sr., Victor Jake, James E. Jelly, H. Johnston, Lawrence P. Kane, Francis J. Kearney, H. Kimball, Adrian L. Labossonere, Paul Walter Lammy Sr., Napoleon Joseph Langcott, killed in action, Adelaide J. Langley, killed in action, Stanley Joseph Levine, Austin Lawrence, Lorenzo Joseph Lefevre, A. Lemire, Helen Jenny Lord, Eva May Lord, Antonio Lozzi, killed in action, Leon C. Mansfield, Clarence E. McElman, James Joseph McNiff, John Thomas McNiff Jr., William Hugh Mills, Emil Joseph Arthur Milo, Joseph Nadoli, Francis Knowers, Carl H. Nylander, Margaret C. O'Hara, J. O'Neill, Robert James Orr Jr., killed in action, Antonio Palermo, killed in action, George H. Parson, F. Perkins, Joseph Perkins, Joseph J. Perkins, Joseph Perry, R. Pickering, Frederick H. Picking, Anthony B. Pavarato, Minor W. Pomeroy, Thomas Stephen Rafferty Jr., Alfred T. Reed, Charles Versal Eastman Roby, Edmund Dix Rogers, Rufus Nelson Rowe, Martin Homer Seavey, A. Schaffer, Charles Nathan Sleeper, Charles Smith Jr., killed in action, Edward J. Smith, John W. Spinner, my uncle, Samuel Stewart, Frederick M. Stewart, Frank Sullivan, Paul E. Sims, F. Tuzano, Frank Daniel Tucker, Ephraim Vickers, Joseph George Walker, Orion Vassar Wells, Harry G. Whitney, Ernest Tibbetts Wright Sr., Norman Herbert Young, Paul Estabrook Zuber. World War II, Harry J. Aaron Jr., Arthur Andre Abud, George Abrahamson, Robert Manfred Abrahamson, Thomas J. Atkin, Floyd B. Aldrich, Thomas R. Aldrich Jr., Chester C. Allen, John A. Allison, Charles E. Amico, Carl Frederick Anderson Jr., Louis J. Antonelli, June R. Lamont Armstrong, Edward J. Ashman, Thomas F. Esty, Alfred J. Axon, Elwyn Allen Bagley, C. M. Baker, Kenneth A. Baker, Frank Valentine Bale, David Robert Barry, George L. Barry, James V. Bacinas, Nicholas V. Bacinas, Wilbur Charles Beard, H. Bulio, Russell Bulio, Raymond A. Beauregard, Wallace J. Beshad, Edward Ellsworth Beebe, Willard Walter Beebe.
World War II continued. Paul Belida, Stephen J. Belinsky, Robert Halden Bell, Frank T. Bernard Jr., George M. Bennett, Albert R. Benoit Jr., S. J. Bernard, Rudolph J. Bernier, Stephen Gregory Pascalo, Ralph A. Bentoncourt, Edgar C. Bibu, Edward S. Billman, Robert Binns, Carl Blake, Peter Bobrick, Anthony Benko, John Benko, Edward J. Beauvais, Lawrence Joseph Beauvais, Richard Beauvais, Roland Edward Beauvais, William J. Beauvais, Hubert E. Boyer, David R. Bonfiglio, Roger Ives Bosworth, Paul Henry Bouton, Richard J. Bradley, Thomas J. Brady, Ernest B. Briquette, Andy Britko, James Henry Brown Jr., Lawrence Currier Brown, Stephen J. Brown, Leo Joseph Brule, Joseph Brule, Raymond Joseph Brule, Joseph W. Brunel, John H. Buchanan, William H. Buchanan, Willis Bucky Edward Buckingham. Virginia Burke. Joseph H. Burns. Edward Leo Burns Sr. George Wassel Bootko. Robert J. Butterfield. Chester Andrew Kalis. D. Callahan. Edward R. Callaway. Roland J. Canton Sr. John R. Carey. Robert J. Carlo Sr. Edgar Karen. Raul L. Karen. Raymond J. Karen. Franklin R. Carr. Leslie Leonard Carroll Jr. William Kittredge Carver. Rex R. Case. John J. Casey. John W. Cassidy. Robert V. Cassidy. Joseph John Costanza. Charles Kavanaugh. B. M. Chambers. Bryant Reed Chaplin. Michael A. Charlton. Joseph F. Carlton. Wesley Gerard Charlton. Robert E. Sharon. Joseph T. Chorney. Herbert Shirley Clark. John Joseph Cody Jr. Leo J. Cohn. Owen Stanley Caldwell Sr. Charles L. Collins. Howard E. Collins. Earl Roger Cannell. Edward Bernard Cannell. George Edward Cannell. John Lawrence Cannell Jr. Philip Richard Cannell. Raymond R. Cannell. Richard Allen Cannell. Robert Cannell. Leo P. Connolly. Chester Herbert Cook Sr. Loxla Lawrence Corwin. James Albert Cosgrove. Edward C. Costello. Gaston Edward Joseph Cody. Harvey Joseph Cody. Marcel Cody. Norman A. Cody. Rial Joseph Cody. Roger Joseph Cody. Roland J. Cody. William J. Cody. Kenneth P. Cottle. Donald E. Kershane. Clifford J. Kershane. Albert W. Cox. R. Kramer. Joseph P. Crimmins. James Hunter Crocker. Kenneth L. Crocker. Leonard Eaton Crocker. Morris Redmond Crocker. John J. Crowley. Eileen E. McNiff Crowley. John A. Zarnecki. Robert Fraser Dalton. Francis Edward Daly. R. Daly, Vincent Bernard Daly, Charles O. Daniels, Wassel Varney Duranchuk.
World War II continued. Thomas F. Dahara, Fred Davis, Wilfred Davison, James E. Davey Jr., Edward N. Dean, Walter A. Dean, Russell Toccato, Anthony D. Felice, A. DeForge, Stanley E. Daniak, Kenneth Edward Delahaye, Francis Lawrence Delaney, Angelo Del Papa, Dominic Del Papa, Nicholas Desenovich, Peter Desenovich, P. F. Discamp, Clarence Harry D. Lascelle, Morris J. DeSaulliers, Kern W. Deverox, Harold George D. Wolfe, Elizabeth L. Diamond, E. S. Dixon, D. D. DeLeo, E. Dillman, Savario Francis Di Lorenzo, Alfred J. DeSanto, John J. Doherty, Paul R. Donahue, Theodore J. Doucette, Manfred L. Doucette, Victor G. Doucette, Irving R. Drew, James Patrick Driscoll, George Doobie, Frank Teofy Doobie, Joseph Duchamp, John J. Duff, Samuel Dugdale, George L. Dumont, Thelma A. Dumont, John Andrew Dundas, Paul Linus Dunnigan, Charles Franklin Dupree, Arthur Joseph Dupress Jr., William O. Dupress, Frank Eastwood Jr., Charles Walter Eaton, Frederick C. Eben, Angelo Peter Eliopoulos, James Matthew Elliott, Joseph Elliott, Frederick H. Ellison, Jacob E. Ellison, Richard Stockton Emmett Jr., Charles G. Avasca, Charles N. Follier Jr., Donald Francis Farrell, John J. Ferrier, A. Fecto, Richard S. Farrell, Elroy Albert Field, Floyd A. Fields, Edward Joseph Finn, Joseph A. Finn, Wico Robert Finala, A. Bruce Fisher, John Francis Fitzpatrick, Frederick J. Fitzpatrick, Jr., Frederick S. Flannery, Harold A. Fletcher, Sr., Joseph Willard Fletcher, Roland Taylor Fletcher, Willard J. Fletcher, Walter Whidden Fletcher, Jr., Arthur M. Flynn, John Charles Forbes, Roger J. Forrest, Luke E. Fortin, Margaret Ann Fortune, Albert George 40, Archer G 40, L Frame, Russell J Frazier, Edwin York Freeman, Manuel J Freitas, Robert Henry Fuller, Michael J Fullerton, William Carroll Furbish, Alfred Joseph Gagnon Sr., Donald George Gagnon, Francis Gagnon, Joseph A. Galanda, Glenn Dennis Garlow, Alfred J. Garside, Ferdinand Roger Gelinas, David George, Joseph Francis German Jr., Daniel G. Gervais, John Thomas Gill, Roger R. Godfrey, Rosie Roger Godfroy, William Ernest Goodwin, George Donald Gower, William Roger Gower, Joseph H. Graham, Ronald Archibald Grant, John Joseph Green, Donald Fletcher Grigg, Armand Joseph Grenier, Alberic Grenier, Thomas S. Groom, Carl William Grunderson Jr., Ralph G. Haberman Jr., George R. Haley Sr., George R. Haley Jr.
World War II continued. Donald Henry Hall, John A. Hall, Eddie B. Hallberg, Gwenfred Hamer, Ralph Hamilton, D. N. Hansen, R. A. Hansen, Axel Friedolf Hansen, Edna Sue M. Hansen, Renee Martin Hansen, Richard E. Hansen, Robert B. Hansen, Matthew J. Harding, James E. Harrigan, Francis Patrick Hart, Daniel Joseph Hartley Sr., Louis Hawshill, Edward L. Hayes, William Hayes, Elmer Lawson Heald, Frederick Sullivan Healy, James L. Healy Sr., John Austin Healy III, William R. Healy, Clifford Hayes Sr., Clarence Edwin Hildreth, Robert W. Hill, Ralph Edward Hinckley, Richard James Hirschler, James Joseph Hobson, John Thomas Holmes, Thomas Emmanuel Holmes, Burton William Holt, Gaillard Lyle Holt, Eric G. Hook, Betty Ross Hook, Harold Hout Hoover Jr., Charles W. Hopkins, William Leslie Hopkins, Charles Chester Howe, Thomas Alfred Hughes Jr., Winifred Catherine McNiff Hulslander, James G. Hunter, James William Hutter, Alvin Laird James, John W. Jedry, Frank A. Duray, Herbert Melvin Johnson, Clifford S. Johnson, David Donald Johnson, Gordon R. Jones, Bronislaw J. Jurowitz, Lawrence P. Kane, Lawrence R. Kane, Calergo Cansaniva, Frank P. Carcota Sr., Herbert P. Bronislaus Kazeniak, Joseph P. Kelly, Edward J. Kelly, Joseph Kelly, Leo Kelly, Carl V. Kern, R. Kaiser, Newell Edward Kimball, Frank A. King, Arthur James Kinney Sr., Willard P. Kester, Michael John Kolesnik Sr., Anthony J. Koscheco, Andrew Koscheco, George Kowalczyk, Bernard Kulizich, Hervey R. Labbe, Thomas La Fionatis, Francis Joseph LaFontaine, Albert Joseph Lafreniere Jr., Arthur Joseph Lamy Jr., Edward N. Lamson, Weatherby Lamson, Roland Noel Joseph Lamy, Treffel Joseph Lamy, C. Lamy, Philip J. Lamy, Henry Joseph Lamy Jr., Wallace Langell, Leo A. Langley, Russell G. Langley, James M. Lankford, Paul Louis Lontaine, Raymond D. Lapen, Gerald J. Lapointe, P. Lationatos, Francis J. Levine, Leroy Earl Leach, Alexander Joseph Lacourte, Emile Joseph Leduc, Robert Leduc, Chester Gerald Liedberg, Robert Louis Legacy, John E. Leggett, Raymond A. Lavasseur, William Lavasseur, Blanche M. Lukowitz, James Lukowitz Jr., Helen Jenny Lord, John Lord, Philip David Lord Jr., Edmund Paul Lowney Jr., Luca Luhank, John M. Lutati, Charles L. Mabey, Gaylord McCartney, George McDonald, Alistair Francis McDougall Jr., William C. McMillan, John Sutherland McMillan Sr., Ian A. McPherson.
World War II continued. J. J. Madigan, Francis W. McGee, Stephen A. Makos, Robert Allen Malley, Michael C. Mancini, John M. Manning Jr., William J. Mantville, Faye Martin, Julian G. Martin, Lionel P. Martin Sr., Herbert F. Martin, Howard G. Mazer, Maurice F. Masson, F. May, Thomas May, Peter John Mazukna, Anthony A. Mazzola, Francis McLeod, John A. McDermott, Patrick James McEnany, Richard Lawrence McGlinchey, Alan Campbell McIntosh, Thomas John McNiff, William F. McLaughlin, James J. McLeod, Francis Clifton McNeil, Edward Lawrence McNiff, Henry Joseph Maynard, Roger Joseph Maynard, Raoul Joseph Maynard, Jr., Walker H. Merritt, Jr., Otis L. Metcalf, Albert Russell McNaught, E. E. Myler, Edward J. Maluski, William Mullane, Charles F. Miller, Forrest E. Miller, William Atwood Millay, Henry Millot, Joseph Emile Fernand Millot, Renaud J. Millot, L. Millot, Joseph Alfred Lucien Millot, Michael Minko, Raymond H. Moan, J. H. Mongan, Charles Edward Moore, Hervé Moore, Nelson Hobart Morgan, P. Mortimer, Edward P. Mountain Sr., Walter Mountain, James Roland Mullen Sr., Francis J. Mulligan, C. Munt, Alf A. Nielsen, Jr., George Linwood Nesmith, Norman Kenneth Nesmith, E. Neville, Anthony J. Nyamask, Harry E. Nixon, Jr., Joseph Arthur Noel, Uno A. Norgol, Walter Nider, John James O'Connell, William Charles O'Connell, Francis J. O'Connor, Jr., Kenneth J. O'Connor, James John Oliver, Roy A. Olson, Arthur Olson, Robert J. O'Malley, Richard O'Neill, Robert Joseph Orr, J. Osborne, Anthony Salvatore Paduano, Henry Payne, David L. Pallion, Salvatore J. Palma, Leon Peter Palmer, Roger Palmer, Antonio J. Paniton, Roland Paniton, Roger Joseph Parent, Sr., Walter Eugene Parfit, Arthur Benjamin Parker, Roland M. Parker, Royce Parlementer, William Anthony Palaskis, George O. Pierce, Peter J. Pelado, Laval U. Peliquin, J. Pelosi, Roland Francis Pendlebury, Arthur T. Perkins, Frank Perkins, John J. Perkins, Joseph W. Perkins, Robert B. Perkins, Felix Raymond Perrault, Wendell L.R. Perry, Edmund S. Pestana, Edgar Peterson, Warren L. Phillips, Ralph Joseph Peach, Albert H. G. Picking, Arthur Picking, John S. Pickwell, Jr., William Wallace Piggott, Arthur Joseph Pomerleau, Leo Pomerleau, Michael J. Popalizio, Vincent J. Popalizio, Salomon Partillo.
World War II continued. Thomas Joseph Preston Sr., Raymond Louis Prudhomme, Eugene J. Queenan, Frederick R. Radcliffe, Thomas Stephen Rafferty Jr., Howard D. Reed, F. Reedy, Wayne Leroy Reinhardt, Annette Georgiana Milo Rickard, Cyril Joseph Rickard, Victor A. Rickard, Carl S. Ricciardi, Eugene Joseph Rue, F. Rizzitano, A. E. Roby, Donald Frederick Robinson, William Anthony Roderick, Charles Roscoe, Franklin Thomas Rose, August Philip Ross, Norman A. Rue, Rufus Nelson Rowe, Robert Philip Roy, Otis Rutland, James V. Ryan, Mary Marigot Saris, Peter Sawasik, Milton Skarmius, Joseph Scudo, Stephen Thomas Sylvian Sr., Gordon Bailey Seavey, Martin Homer Seavey, George Sokovich, John Sedak, Peter Sedak, Stephen Sedak, George S. Seddon, Margaret Phyllis Valentine Seddon, Earl B. Selfridge, R. E. Shamp, Walter B. Shaw, D. Shaw, Norman E. Shaw Jr., Daniel D. Shea, Warren D. Sherman, John Gabriel Shine, John Edward Sugaru, Richard F. Skian, Avery L. Smith, Harry V. Smith, Joseph H. Smith Jr., Margaret Dare Smith, Robert Leo Sabowski, Henry Joseph Spadano Sr., Richard L. Stacy, Chesley A. Steele, William Stevenson Jr., Samuel Stewart, Maurice J. St. Hilaire, Joseph Edward St. Onge, Alexander Strumsky, Edward F. Stewart, William O. Stumpf, Anthony J. Succo, Nicholas Sudak Jr., Leo F. Supple, Alfred Alonzo Sutherland, Stanley N. Suzadelis, Herbert P. Swanson, Morris Harvey Swanson, Varnum Hartford Swanson, William Tunis Sweetman, Magnus Swensley, Edmund Sylvian, Francis J. Sylvian, Vital F. Sylvian, Epitaco J. Takason, Michael Talancey Jr., Robert Henry Talbot, Frank A. Talmer, Hormidas Wilfred Tangway, Theodore J. Targ, Edward B. Tague, Leo Edmund Therian, Roland R. Therian, James F. Thibault, Charles L. Thompson, William E. Tim, Robert Leo Topgin Jr., Wilfred J. Tuzano, Joseph E. Town Jr., Herbert Norman Tremblay, John Everett Trousdale, Joseph Francis Ewer, John A. Urbanek, Henry U. Vadaboncourt, Paul Emile Valcourt, John T. Vellum Sr., Francis J. Van Beaver, Wilbur Lewis Vaughn, Nicholas Vorope, Elbert V. Wainwright Jr., James J. Walker, Joseph George Walker, Edward S. Warcole, Dennis P. Watson, Edwin James Weber Sr., Robert M. Welsh Sr., Elizabeth Wells, Huntington Leonard Wells, James Edward Whalen, Eric Leon Whiting, Harry G. Whitney, Ivan V. Whitney.
World War II continued. Bernard M. Wilder, James Wilson, Affleck Florian Wojtowicz, Florian Peter Wojtowicz Jr., Andrew Wolkovich, Walter Wolkovich, Clark Irwin Woodard, Alexander Mikhail Wozniak, Charles Dexter Wright Jr., Alfred Charles Wyman, Gilbert M. Wyman, Horace F. Wyman, Shirley C. Wyman, Waldo Ward Yarnell, John Francis Young, John S. Young, Nicholas P. Zahar, Peter Ziss Sr., Raymond Zitta, Homer Ashley Zwicker. The Korean War. Robert Wayne Allen, Carl R. Anderson, John William Anderson Sr., William Everett Anderson Sr., John Thomas Antonelli Jr., Richard P. Araj Jr., Joseph Anthony Aruda, Joseph R. Asselin, Robert T. Ayer Jr., Helen June Hanson Bankhead, Richard J. Barrett Sr., Richard A. Bennett, Walter A. Barrow, Jerry G. Berkowitz, Edward Anthony Baroth, Paul Gerard Berry, John L. Black, killed in action, William Blott, Sol M. Bojarski, Joseph D. Boudreau, Gerald A. Bork, Robert F. Bradley Sr., Morris E. Bro, R. Brenton, Roger M. Breton, Eugene Herman Brooks, James Henry Brown, Jr., Joseph Patrick Brown, Joseph Richard Brule, Thomas E. Burns, Jr., William J. Carey, Jr., Roger Clarence Karkin, Leslie Leonard Carroll, Jr., Stanley A. Carroll, Eugene Carter, Rex R. Case, John William Cassidy, Jr., Joseph E. Champy, Jr., William B. Coakley, Russell N. Cobley, Clarence Richard Cannell, Joseph R. Cannell, William Daniel Cannell, Norman Arthur Cody, Richard Warren Coughlin, James A. Curley, John J. Daly, Albert J. Danielle, Richard Adrian Devon, David Sharrox Day, Walter A. Dean, Robert N. Diet, Alvin Patrick Doobie Sr., George L. Dumont, Gordon Dingwell Dunn, Joseph W. Durow, Jr., Joseph E. Elliott, Chester L. Ellis, Jr., Theodore Wells Engel, Robert R. Fitzpatrick, Harold A. Fletcher, Sr., R. Fletcher, John J. Foley, Paul E. Fredette, Russell J. Frazier, Ernest Paul Gagnon, Amy J. Gervais, Albert F. Griffin, Kenneth A. Grimm, Robert John Grippo, Thaddeus S. Grochmal, Carol William Gwenstrom, Jr., George R. Haley, Jr., Philip Gilman Hall, Ernest Dwight Hanson, Paul Francis Harhan, B. T. Hart, John Daniel Hartley, Floyd Haywood, Jr., Conrad Joseph Harrow, Robert Murray Hicks, Robert W. Hill, Herbert K. Hillman, Richard James Hirschler, Bernard Gilbert Holmes, Richard Thomas Holmes, Robert A. Holmes, William J. Holmes, William J. Hubbard, Jr., Harry Melvin Hoolings, James Williams Hutter, Ernest Franklin Jenkins, David Donald Johnson, Douglas J. Johnston, Richard Ellsworth Jordan, Daniel Leo Joyce, Jr., John Kelsowan.
Korean War continued. Lawrence R. Kane, John James Kavanaugh, Wayne R. Keith, Charles Spalding Kennedy, Donald J. Knight, Marjorie Ellen Kester, Leonard L. Kulikowski, John LaFond, Jr., Andrew Joseph Lambert, Claude Gillis Lammy, Robert Gerard Langley, Russell G. Langley, Richard F. Lavoie, Alfred Thomas Lawrence, Walter C. Lawrence, W. F. Leach, Robert Paul Lefebvre, Roger B. Lefebvre, John E. Legat, James Daniel Lahan Sr., Richard Paul Lennox Jr., Paul Gerard Levasseur, William G. Leupold Sr., James B. McDonald, Roderick Lawrence McClellan Sr., Kenneth A. McMillan, Fred F. Magdalensky, Robert Channel May Sr., Theodore Stanley Majewski, Richard Marson, Harry Edward May Jr., Donald McCaffrey, Thomas Martin McHugh, Paul J. McGeeney Sr., William Stephen McKenna, Henry J. Millett, Joseph Armand Milo Sr., Lionel Joseph Milo, Paul T. Milo, Raymond Paul Milo, Richard A. Milo, Nelson Hobart Morgan, Victor A. Neal Sr., Thomas A. O'Laughlin Jr., Robert J. O'Malley, Ralph J. Osena, Frank Page, Lloyd Clarence Pease, Lucien Henry Pepin, Donald R. Phillips, Donald Bentz Pick, Herbert A. Pitts Jr., Wilmer Pofcher, Frederick L. Pond, Hubert Ronald Provost, Frederick A. Raymond, Hubert J. Raymond, Bernard Joseph Ricard, George Henry Ricard, Richard John Romack, Carlton M. Rooks, Alan R. Rose, Franklin Thomas Rose, Joseph A. Rosello, Ronald G. Sandholm, John Anthony Santos, Mary Marigo Saras, Ralph Joseph Senna, Harold Francis Shannon, Lawrence Ingalls Shea, Patrick J. Sheridan, John Thomas Smith, William Edward Smith, Donald R. St. Ange, Norman B. St. Ange, Frederick N. Sudak, John N. Tamankis, George L. Tattleman, James Francis Thompson, Jr., William S. Trask, Kenneth Joseph Valcourt, Bernard C. Victory, Edwin Whitney, Robert W. Willis, Maurice J. Wynne, Norrance L. Woods, Ronald M. Wozniak, Ernest Tebbets Wright, Jr., John S. Young, Gunnar Valdez Sagers. Vietnam War. Charles Edward Aaron, killed in action. Donald A. Alcorn, Sr., Gerard J. Arciero, Theodore J. Barrett, William M. Barry, Jerry G. Berkowitz, Richard Roland Boisvert, Peter E. Boudreau, Leo Bowes, Dennis G. Boyd, Donald Edward Brocious killed in action, James Henry Brown Jr., Richard R. Brown, Richard Ellis Brundet Jr. killed in action, William M. Bryant, Henry Francis Cahill, John E. Carolyn Jr., Robert V. Cassidy, Chester Allen Clark, Philip J. Collins, Stephen T. Collins, Paul J. Conlon, Raymond A. Connell, Richard Connolly, Dennis Crochane, Barre A. Craig, David J. Kuna, Max M. Curtis.
Vietnam continued. Harland W. Dagnall, David Sharrox Day, Lawrence V. Dean, Michael Dean, George R. D. Sr., Stephen Mark D., Bruce Allen Dillon, A. W. Dobeski, James F. Donahoe, Jr., John David Doucette, John Peter Driscoll, John Joseph Dropet, Jr., William F. Duggan, George L. Dumont, David Paul Ebbett, Magnus John Einrenson, William Ewes, Robert James Ferrin, John Joseph Gagnon, Julio Ugat Gadalado, Robert F. Gillette, Richard J. Gringus, Normand J. Godfrey, Theodore Victor Godfrey, James M. Greco, Richard D. Grzynsky, Joseph Andrew Guthrie, Jr., Stephen J. Halloran, Charles R. Harvey, Albert C. Herget, Robert W. Hill, Anita Terenzio Hook, Bruce Meredith Hughes, Sr., Kenneth Rockwell Hughes, Richard Milne Emerson, Ernest Franklin Jenkins, Thomas Francis Joyce, John Calsohan, Robert Kilos, Edward James Kazara, Paul M. LaChance Sr., Bruce Irving Lambert, Paul J. Lemmy, Charles J. Landry Sr., George I. Lauren Selly, Stephen Charles Leary, Henry E. Leduc, Roger L. Lundergan, John J. Mack Sr., Robert W. McQuarrie, Richard Edward Mahana, Anthony Martinez III, Michael G. McConnell, Edward McKenna, James Brendan McKenna, Harold L. McClatchy, Donald R. Menifee, Richard J. Mooney, George A. Moore, Nelson Hobart Morgan, Harold Joseph Newell, Jr., John J. O'Connell, Jr., Michael F. O'Connor, Sr., William T. O'Donnell, Norman Olson, Robert J. O'Malley, Robert J. Panetton, Roger Joseph Parker, William Gable Poist, Lionel Peliquin, Noel David Rainville, Jr., Hubert J. Raymond, George Edward Reeves, Jr., Harold Leo Reynolds, Samuel Richards, Jr., Charles Rogers, Mary Maggio Saras, Lawrence Ingalls Shea, Paul George Smith, Peter D. St. Onge, Douglas Sundberg, Armand Joseph Supinant, Jr., Paul M. Sylvia, Joseph W. Trembrino, William L. Thompson, William J. Toohey, Jr., Brian L. Vaughn, John F. Wagner, Gerald Walter Walsh, John J. Walsh, Walter Barry Welcome, Alan M. Wells, Stanley Gordon Whitney, Floyd P. Wood, John Eugene Roble, Jr., Brian Stevens Wyman. Persian Gulf War, Douglas A. Dyett, Jesse Patrick LeDrew, Daniel Francis Provost, Jr. Afghanistan, Michael K. Dowling, William Joseph Wojtowicz, Robert John Brazil, William Edward Collins, Edmund Francis Donnelly, David Brian Grand, Derek M. Halverson, Stephen Hamilton, Rick Earl Hersey, Richard Milne Ingerson, William J. Kavanaugh, Jr., Richard E. Kenyon, Sanford B. Smith, Franco Gerardo Vintola, Michael Francis Villarelli, William Hugh Ward, Sr., Robert Edward Wilkie. This concludes the reading of the Westford Honor Roll for Memorial Day 2020. This year we audio recorded and read 1,150 names of those brave men and women who served their country. For as long as they are remembered, they shall not be forgotten. It is also fitting that we dedicate this day to recognize a new group of veterans engaged in fighting the war on the COVID-19 virus, some of which have paid the extreme price. To our National Guard, doctors, nurses, and their technical support personnel, emergency medical technicians, police, fire personnel, for their role in fighting this conflict, as the other brave men and women who served their country and we have honored today. We thank you for your unselfish service.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France. At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, the Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers at the edge of the cliffs shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades. And the American Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. When one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top, and in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. These are the boys of Pointe-de-Vaux.